So I would like to start by thanking our sponsors, because without our sponsors, events like this wouldn't be possible. And the fact that we're able to offer this to you for free is because of collaborations and fiscal contributions from our sponsors. I also, instead of just naming our sponsors, I want to tell you a little bit about them, because all of our sponsors today are resources in our community that you all can use. So our first sponsor, Guardians for New Futures, with Debbie Butler. Their mission is to increase community awareness regarding the maltreatment of children and child deaths due to abuse and neglect. They help educate our community and bring awareness on issues concerning children, and provide assistance and resources to meet the needs of children, as well as support the needs of guardian ad litem volunteers. Our next sponsor is Sandy Pines. Sandy Pines is a residential treatment center that provides children and adolescents the opportunity to confront their personal issues, engage in problem-solving process, test new behaviors, and formulate a more constructive approach to life's challenges. Every effort at Sandy Pines is made to create a safe and supportive environment in which to build on personal strengths and challenging destructive behaviors. I have to thank the Martin County Library System. They've offered this space to us in kind, and they do often do that for us. They're such a valuable resource in our community. And their mission statement is to connect with people and create learning opportunities that improve communities. And I think they're doing a great job at that. And I have to thank a very special sponsor who my work that I do would not be possible without, and that is the Children's Services Council of Martin County. For those of you that don't know, the Children's Services Council of Martin County is an independent taxing district. And they take the local tax dollars and they take that money and they put it back into programs and services that help our youth here in Martin County. Everything that I do at Tyson Teens with Prevention Services, from Project Northland, an alcohol and substance abuse prevention curriculum, to events like this, would not be possible without the Children's Services Council of Martin County. Without them, our community would be in dire straits. And their purpose is to plan, coordinate, fund, and evaluate programs and to address public policy issues relating to children in Martin County. And of course, Tyson Teens. Tyson Teens, like I mentioned, is a nonprofit organization in Palm City. And we're dedicated to supporting and strengthening our community through quality prevention, education, and social emotional healing services for children and families. And my executive director is probably very upset with me that I cannot just recite that without reading it. You changed the mission on us. I knew that one inside and out. It used to be we offered affordable mental health care, but anyhow. And we still do offer affordable mental health care for children and families. And we have an outpatient alcohol and drug prevention program called Youth Enrichment Services. Children get suspended from school. You can send them to our ALTOS program. And can tell I love where I work. So without any further ado, I would like to, well, actually, before I introduce our keynote, I want to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen. We are going to hear today from Jackie Rosen, who's come all the way from Broward County. And after Jackie presents to us about some very important information about suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, you will hear from Tyson Teens Executive Director Jeff Shearer, who will be sharing with us why mental health matters in Martin County. And then we also will be hearing from 211, and a very, very valuable resource in our community that we should all be using to help our children and our families in Martin County, especially when it comes to suicide prevention, because they really are our only crisis intervention emergency call. So, besides 911. All right, so let me introduce to you Jackie. Jackie was a founding member and board member of the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention, also known as FISP. FISP is a volunteer 501c3 organization established in Florida, originally as the Florida chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in 1991. In 2001, FISP changed its name and became an independent organization. FISP was originally founded by a mother, from one of 5 families who lost children to suicide and met at a Compassionate Friends support group. Jackie founded in 1987. Only 9 months after the death of her son, Mitchell, by suicide, both before the loss of her son and since the loss, Jackie continued to be an educator, an advocate, a fundraiser, and board member in many organizations. Jackie's background is in education. She's owned 2 design businesses. She's been a political campaign manager, and as a volunteer has enabled her to combine all of her abilities as the executive director and CEO of the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention. Her passion to prevent other families from experiencing the pain that her family experienced has helped to develop and expand new and innovative suicide prevention programs. She has attended classes and conferences continuously during the last 27 years to expand her knowledge and ability to communicate this knowledge regarding suicide and prevention. We are extremely grateful to have Jackie here with us today to help us understand and prevent suicide. Thank you.
What I want to share with you today is some of the things that I have learned over the last 27 years from professionals, from survivors, from people who are actually thinking of taking their lives. Tell you what the warning signs are so that you can remember and take them with you, and what the protective factors are, which is one of the most important things that you are going to learn. We're going to learn some intervention. I tell this to everyone. There is not a person alive who cannot be a gatekeeper. All they have to do is know what to look for and listen. And so you as gatekeepers, especially as a professional, can save lives. We can prevent suicide. It is preventable. We want you to be able to identify a suicidal person. And when I get to that, I'm going to tell you, you may be able to identify, but unfortunately, you may not be able to save their lives no matter how hard you try, because I wouldn't be standing here today if everybody could be saved. And one of the things as a professional you have to learn is to take care of yourself, even though you've tried really, really, really hard. It's a little bit backwards to say suicide is preventable, but that's the reality. And we will talk about that and how it affects you as professionals. Also, we'll talk to you about intervention techniques, what you do to intervene when you think somebody is suicidal. And can you identify the resources that are available for somebody who is suicidal? And if your client is a victim of bullying and bullyicide, we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I have a terrific slide on bullying and something you can give to people who are bullies to change their minds about bullying for all kids. And postvention. How do you help a child after there's been a suicide in the family? This is a major, major thing that you need to do, because those who have experienced suicide in their family also are at higher risk to take their own lives. We're going to discuss that. Did you know that more than 19 million Americans suffer from depression? More than from coronary heart disease, from cancer, from HIV/AIDS. In 2009, and unfortunately that's the newest figures we have for the nation, there were 36,909 suicides in the U.S. If you look at these figures, which are more up to date, there is a suicide in the United States every 13.7 minutes. There is an attempt every 32 seconds. Can you imagine that? Every 32 seconds? That's pretty scary. There are twice as many deaths by suicide as there are by HIV/AIDS and homicide. How many of you see all the information about every homicide that happens in the newspaper? How many of you see any information about suicide prevention and how to prevent a suicide after a suicide occurs in the newspaper? Nobody. And we're trying to get them to do more coverage of suicide in the proper way, and there is a proper way to cover it. The AFSP has done a lot of research for the proper way for the public entities to talk about suicide and for the newspapers and magazines to cover it and any form of that. Suicide is the second highest killer of college students. Second highest killer. And the third highest killer of teens. At least when I have a presentation that I do with teens, and I do a lot of school presentations, I have 12 kids stand up. And I say to them, look around the room. Tomorrow, 12 kids your age will not be here because they will have died of suicide. And that makes a great impact on kids because they can see their friends standing there and relate to the fact that maybe their friends won't be there, or maybe somebody they know won't be there. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to teach kids to speak up. And I'll talk about that a little later. If you'll grab one of our Hope Club brochures back there, and I brought a lot of handouts, you will have a lot of information. If you grab one of our Hope Club, you'll see some of the things we're trying to do with that, and I'll explain it. Florida statistics, do you know, not by the thousand, but by actual numbers, we are have the second highest number of suicides in the States. Second highest number of suicides. And suicide is the 8th cause of death in Florida. That's pretty frightening, isn't it? Florida is the 17th highest rate by population, and Broward County, where I come from, has the highest rate. In Broward County, the youngest two to die by suicide were 7 and 9 years old. Can you imagine a 7 and a 9-year-old feeling so helpless and so hopeless that they resort to suicide? I've sat with therapists and had them tell me stories about 5-year-olds that have said they want to run in front of a car because they don't want to be here anymore. 5-year-olds. Our society is doing something very wrong. What we're finding is that our children are more stressed, more depressed than they ever were. And preschoolers are the fastest growing market for antidepressants. At least 4% of preschoolers, over 1 million, are clinically depressed. Preschoolers! The rate of increase of depression among children is a astounding 23%. 15 of those are suffering from depression and will die of suicide. Incredible. Now, we need to talk a little bit, and I will a little later, about what our society has become. Part of it, I believe, is due to the technology changes that we're using with children not knowing how to express themselves because they're in these little boxes that they're pushing around with their fingers, and they can't communicate with person to person. So we're going to talk about that a little today too. One of the biggest groups that dies of suicide are youth in foster care. Foster care youth are usually in foster care for a reason that is affecting the family process, and so they have backgrounds that are not very well set up. So what we're finding is that they are 3 times more likely to consider suicide and 4 times more likely to actually attempt, the kids that are in foster care. 54% of foster care children are previously sexually abused. And these are some of the things that get kids to the point of helplessness and hopelessness. 28% have been physically abused or neglected by parents. It's both ways, either too much physical abuse or total neglect. Many of their families have been afflicted with violence, mental illness, or drug and alcohol abuse. Now, let's talk about drug and alcohol abuse in a family and what that does, and we'll talk about that a little later too. What drug and alcohol abuse does. They most often suffer from stresses from separation from the family, the caregivers, and maltreatment. Imagine a young child who may be abused, who may have a terrible life at home, but at least that's home. And then you take them out of that home, and they have nothing that feels familiar or comfortable. And so that separation serves to make them even more apt to be depressed. So that's another reason. They feel a sense of loss, shame. Shame is a big thing. I feel so much in shame because I've been taken away from my family. My family's no good. Isolation due to the separation. Their social supports are changed. They may change schools. They may change whether if they go to church or friends or neighbors. So nothing is familiar for them to hold on to. Okay. A teen dies by suicide every 2 hours and 1.5 minutes or 12 per day. That's really the most amazing thing to me, to think, I'm going to be here today until 8 o'clock tonight. How many kids are going to die while I'm here in Martin County doing presentations? That's really, really, really makes me want to work harder because I need to help them save these lives. In a typical high school in Florida of 1,000 youth, approximately 85 will attempt suicide annually. How many suicides have you had from high schools here in Martin? Does anybody know? I don't know. But I know in Broward we've had, in the school that's in the community that I live in, there's been 2. In Tarabella High School, there's been 2. In Douglas High School, there's been 2. And so that's just in the last year. But there's 6 that I personally have dealt with in Broward County. Males complete 5 times more often than females. I shouldn't say girls, I should say females. Why is that? Does anybody know? By the way, I'm an interactive person, so if you want to speak up, raise your hand. Please do. Yes?
Males tend toward choosing more violent, successful means.
Absolutely, and it's mostly guns. Mostly guns. There's been a slight rise in hangings, but it's mostly guns. And we don't want to talk about gun rules, do we? Okay. Females attempt suicide twice or more often than males. Why don't they die? Anybody? Yes?
Less lethal attempts.
I'm sorry?
Less lethal attempts.
Less violent attempts. They use pills or something that, and not only that, but they also speak up. They are more apt to let people know what's happening. They're more apt to share what their feelings are, okay? 6,500 American teenagers complete suicide every year. 6,500. Look what we're losing. We're losing the brains of what they could accomplish. We're losing the economy that they could contribute to. We're losing the love and the companionship and the future children. I think about my son, and by the way, you're more than welcome to ask any questions you want, but I think about my son, and I think he never did get a chance to get married. He never did get a chance to have children. He never did get a chance to have his career. I stood at my daughter's wedding and I thought, my son's not here. These are the things that people who lose someone by suicide cannot replace. They cannot change. And it's such a shame that families have to go through this when we now are better off than we were when I lost him 27 years ago. 27 years ago, we didn't have the meds that we have now. We didn't have a lot of things that we have now. But it's such a shame and such a loss to our community. Okay, 9 out of 10 suicide attempts take place in the home. And when? When do they take place? Just before mom and dad come home. Why? Anybody?
They're hoping to be saved.
They're hoping to be saved, some of them, or they're trying to say, hey, you wouldn't listen to me, so this is what I did. I had no other choice. I didn't get what I needed, so this is what I had to do, or this is what I'm doing. So, cluster suicides have increased. I had a mom call me one day and say, I just got a call from a friend of my daughter's mother who said she looked on her daughter's laptop and saw that her friend said that she wanted to die of suicide and they were planning to all do it together, this whole group. There were 7 kids, 7 little girls in this group. What do I do? And I said, get on the phone, call all the mothers, get together, I will talk to you, and I will tell you what to do, and then we get the kids all together and we get them into some kind of help. And we did. And guess what? Nobody tried. Thank God. So if you get something like that, you act immediately. You don't just sit there and do nothing. Okay, about half of the suicide victims have been in trouble with law or school. You know, kids have a very limited amount of solving problem abilities. They say that the brain really doesn't get to that point until about 25. So if they can't solve problems, they can't believe that things will change. They don't listen to the words that my mom used to say to me whenever I had a problem. Honey, don't worry, this too shall change. This too will change. So this is what I tell kids too. This too will change. There will be a difference in your life. Nothing is forever. And for them to get to know that is very important. So if they're in trouble with the law or with school, and I'm going to show you a video a little later that makes this very, very clear. If they're in trouble with school and they can't figure out how to get out of it, or they're ashamed to tell anybody, or they don't know to go to an adult, then they feel that the only way out is to not be here. So that's the other reason. Almost half of suicide victims are known to abuse drugs and alcohol. Does anybody know why they do that? Anybody? Stop the pain, self-medication. It's as simple as that. And we're not sure with drugs and alcohol which comes first. The depression or mental illness, and I hate the word mental illness. When you leave today, I'm going to try and change your thinking. I want you to think in terms of a brain disorder or a brain disease. Because if we can change the separation of, quote, mental disorder over here and physical disorder over there, we can start reducing the stigma and get people to realize that this up here is our most important organ. It's more important or as important as your heart, your lungs, your anything, because this controls everything. This is your computer. And when this doesn't work, nothing else does. So if you think of it as a brain disorder or brain disease, which is part of the body as a whole, and we start to think about that, then we get rid of the stigma and the thoughts that it's over here and I'm over here. And it's okay to have cancer. I remember, I'm an old lady. I remember, and I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember this, when nobody said the, quote, C word. If you had it, you had, did you know she got cancer? That's the way it is with brain disorder and brain disease. And we need to change that, because if we don't change that, people won't go for help because of the stigma, because of their beliefs. And if they don't go for help, what happens? It gets worse and worse and worse. And when a disease or disorder gets worse, you can die. Simple as that. Okay. The National Institute of Mental Health believes that as many as 25 to 150 suicide attempts are made for each attempt. We don't know about most of them. We don't even know about all the suicides. How many of the, quote, one-car accidents, overdoses, accidental overdoses, are really suicides? We don't don't know that. And they're having a very difficult time figuring out what it is that really is the number for suicides. And so when you think about that, our numbers are very, very off, very off. The top 3 messages in suicide by young people are firearms, suffocation, and poison, and that's pretty much with everybody. It's not just kids. Those are the top 3 things that are used for suicide. There are cutting, as there are people that slit their wrists and their necks, unfortunately, still. How many of you know a youngster that's a cutter? Mm-hmm. And what is that cutting a precursor to? Sometimes it is a precursor, not all the time, but sometimes it is a precursor to suicide. And what is it about? Does anybody know what cutting is about?
Control.
Control. Control of pain. Control of pain. Control of what they feel. And if they can control the pain, then sometimes they don't suicide. But if it gets to a point where that's not enough control, and the pain gets worse and worse, the next step is suicide. Yes?
Does hanging come under suffocation?
No, suffocation and hanging are different. Hanging is with a rope, suffocation's a bag or something else, or in a car with the motor running, which we don't see as many of those as we used to. So it is different. Okay. What means are we only hear of a small percentage of suicide attempts completed because they're hidden or misclassified. I already went through that. Understanding that a teen suicide attempt is a call for help is essential to preventing the suicide later. Yes?
I have a question about the poisoning.
Yes.
Do you think that that number is so low because it's not successful? Because I would imagine that that overdose or poisoning would be higher.
Yeah, it isn't because of the accidental, quote, overdoses, number one. And number two, a lot of poisonings, they get stopped.
Right.
They get saved, yes. And that's one of the reasons why some of the people who use it do use it, because they're screaming and nobody's hearing. So, okay, now you're going to listen. Now you're going to know how desperate I am. Okay? So that's where that goes. What's that? 6,500 American teenagers, which we already did. Suicide rates for 10 to 19-year-old females and 15 to 19-year-old males increased significantly in 2004. Does anybody have... Thank you. Does anybody know why 2004 was such a big day? Yes?
When all the financial problems started.
Yes, but that's not the answer that I'm looking for. Anybody else? You ever hear of the black box? What's a black box? Anybody know what a black box is? Yes.
The thing they put in cars to clock your speed, and after you have a car crash, it tells what speed you were going when it crashed.
Well, that's one kind of black box, but not the one I'm talking about. Anybody else?
Airplane? In the airplane?
No.
Oh.
I'm surprised none of you know what this is.
Medication.
The warning on the medication. Exactly. Remember when they put the warning on the medication that says this can cause suicidal thoughts for adolescents and young adults? Remember when that went on? That was in 2004. Do you know what the result of that was? Parents, primary physicians, and some other psychologists stopped giving antidepressants to kids. And yes.
What do they call the black box? I missed something.
I have no idea. I have no idea, but that's what they call it. The reason was that people were afraid to give antidepressants to kids and young adults, and the rate went up significantly. Now, if you look at the warning, it says it can cause suicidal thoughts, not necessarily suicide. And what we have found is with medication is a big deal about how it is administered and who prescribes it. I will tell you that I personally think that the only people that should be prescribing that kind of medication should be psychiatrists because they're trained in it. Most people get it from their family physician. And most people get it from the family physician and he says, I'll see you in a month or two, we'll see how you're doing. Well, when you go on new medications for psychiatric problems, you need to be watched every single week. You need to have somebody there checking on you to make sure that the medication is not having the bad effects, that it's the right medication. We know that sometimes there's up to 5 changes in medication before the right combination or the right amount is there. So medication is wonderful. It is a savior of a lot of lives, but when it is administered properly by the proper person. And that's really, really important to know with your patients if you're dealing with patients. Make sure that they're getting the proper dosages and the proper care on their medication. So what they found was it may make suicidal ideation, but rarely, very rarely did it end in suicide as a result of the medication. The medication helped. And I would absolutely recommend that you have therapy and medication as the ultimate final help for most people who have depression. Okay. Half the children in school are bullied, and we're going to talk about bullying on a little bit more information. 10% on a regular basis, and it does make kids think of suicide. Yes?
Question on the antidepressants. Did you say they should be seen by the psychiatrist weekly?
Yes, in the beginning. In the beginning, until, most drugs, and the newer ones that are coming out seem to work quicker, but some of them don't take effect for 1 to 4 weeks. And during that period, sometimes when they start to take effect, some people are, I don't know how to say this, so they start to feel better. They start to get the energy. And if they're thinking about suicide, they get the energy now to do it, where they didn't have it when they were so depressed they couldn't get out of bed. So that's why it's so important to make sure that they are watched carefully, especially in those first 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, because that's when they can get the energy if they're thinking of it. Any other questions about that? Okay. So we're going to talk about bullying, because bullying, yes.
There's one question. I have a question. What is that a lot of psychiatrists do typically administer psychotropic medication? How many are certified to administer these medications to children? Because there's so many long-term effects. If you're administering this medication to a child, who's to say what the long-term effect is?
You are absolutely right. And there are some psychiatrists who specialize in children's medication, and that's what you have to look for, okay? Some kids stay on it their whole lives. Some kids get through it and get off of it. But you have to look for somebody who does know about administering to children. There is a difference. There is a difference. And the other thing is that there's a difference with each person. Medications are very, very different with each person. It's not like you can give a pill, a normal pill that people give a certain dosage to everybody. It's not that way. People metabolize things different and they react to them different. So it's a very, very complicated process that has to be very carefully watched. Thank you for that question. So, yes?
One other question about the medication for depression and the therapy. Should the therapy be given by a psychiatrist or a counselor?
Most psychiatrists don't do therapy anymore. They just do medication. There are a few that do. So usually it's by, the medication is by the psychiatrist and the therapy is by the psychologist or licensed mental health worker. So that's usually the way it works. And they should, by the way, when you talk about that, they need to communicate with each other. Don't have one over here and one over here. They need to talk about what that patient is getting and communicate. And as a therapist who may send somebody, make sure you try and get some communication between the psychiatrist and the therapist. Okay. Next. Okay, LGBT. I used to say GLBT. Now I say LGBT because somebody told me I should say it that way. I don't see the difference. It's, if you look on the web, they're all the same. There are a variety. I've gotten involved with the LGBT community quite a bit lately because they have one of the highest rates of suicide, and especially in the teen years. There are very high rates of suicide. And what we just did is we just had a grant that we did a bunch of discussions with LGBT community, and they formed a play talking about all of their reasons why they have the stresses that they do and end up dying of suicide. And we did 2 plays, and I just got another small grant. We're going to continue it a little bit. So I've learned a tremendous amount about this community and the strife that they have and how difficult it is for them in many, many ways. And one of the things is that the youth in the LGBT are 1.5 to 3 times more likely to have reported suicidal ideations than non-LGBT youth. Why do you think that they are so much higher rate? Yes?
They're definitely a lot higher because their rate of bullying is higher. Their kids their age don't understand them. They're more tormented. It's just a lot more complicated for them.
All of the above. All of the above. And the struggle that they have within themselves as to who they are, the struggle they have with their families, the rate of teens that are thrown out of their house when they come out as gay by their parents is very, very high. And they're on the street and they have to try and sustain themselves. So it is a very, very, very difficult time. Teenage years are difficult anyway. Everybody in their teenage years are struggling to find out who they are. Can you imagine adding to that a struggle with your sexuality? It's very, very difficult time. So research has revealed that the LGBT youth are 7 times more likely to have reported attempting suicide. Not all of them complete, but they attempt at a much higher rate. Studies found that 8.1% of gay or bisexual males in grades 7 through 12 have attempted at least once during their lives, and some many times. While only 4.2% of heterosexual males in those grades have attempted. So there's a huge difference in that. Corresponding percentages of females were 20.5% lesbian or bisexual females and 14% for heterosexual females. So those figures demonstrate the huge change in variety. Transgender, and by the way, we don't have real good figures on suicide deaths in LGBT community. Why do you think that is? Yes?
It's passed off as an accident, it's stigmatized.
Very often, but more than that, they don't put sexual orientation on death certificates. So we don't know. We tried to do some research on it and couldn't find the answers. Okay. So more than half of transgender and gender non-conforming people who were bullied, harassed, or assaulted in school because of their gender identity have attempted suicide, according to the National Transgender Discrimination Survey conducted by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force and National Center for Transgender Equality. They are the ones that have the biggest problem, because not only are they confused about their gender, but many of them go through the process of becoming the other gender or dressing like that gender. And it's really, really, I'm telling you, I've been dealing with he's a young man now, for the last 3.5 years. He's not in Florida, and I talk to him on the phone all the time. I happen to know his parents. And his struggle was incredible. He knew from the time he was about 7 years old that he was in the wrong body. He just didn't belong in the body he was in. And he tried very, very hard to be a girl, but he didn't fit. And he finally went through the upper surgery. He still hasn't done the lower surgery, but he's living as a man. And he's still struggling with the transition because that's very difficult with all of the medications and the hormones they take. But he's getting there. He's getting there. And one day, I got the phone call and he said to me, I don't know how I could have gotten through this without you to talk to. And I said, well, there are a lot of people you can talk to, but you know I'm always here. And that's what he needed. Somebody that was always there and accepted what was happening to him. Okay? 41% of all respondents reported that they had attempted suicide, compared with the national 1.6. 41%. And the National Center says that participating report attempted suicide at a rate of 25 times the national average. So that's the next group. Let's talk about myths and truths. What is true on this list? Talking about suicide will plant the idea and somebody will do it because it's told. Anybody?
No.
Thank you. Suicide is not usually caused by one traumatic event.
Probably false.
What is it?
Oh, true.
That's true.
Reading it wrong.
Most people that die of suicide have had a long process to get there. Just think about it. They have to plan how. They have to get what they need to do it. They have to plan where, when. So it's a planning process. It's not an instantaneous thing. And it takes time for them to get to the point where they're able to do that. So the last thing that happens is usually the trigger. Now there are some kids that are very impulsive, that can do it impulsively, but most of the time it's not an impulsive one event act. Most people want to die of suicide. What do they want to do? Stop the pain. Exactly. Exactly. And people have asked me, what does it take to get to the point where you can overcome that strong instinct that we have to survive? Think about that. You'd do anything to survive, wouldn't you? Anything. How do they overcome that? Well, I came up with a picture that I want to put in your mind. Suppose you were in a car accident and you were burned over 80% of your body. And you know how painful burns are. I can testify because I just dripped some hot tea on my chest and got a burn, so I know it hurts. And you got burned over 80% of your body, and you're in horrendous pain, and they take you to the hospital, and they start working on you, and they put you all in bandages and everything, and the doctor comes in and he says to you, I don't know how to tell you this, but the whole country is out of pain medication. And we have nothing to help you stop the pain. And we don't know when we're going to get it. And I can't tell you when your pain's going to stop. What would you do? How would you cope? How would you exist? I had this example at one place and I was talking about, and he said, I'd go to another hospital. That's why now I say everybody's out of it. But that's where they're at. They're at a place where they are in such incredible, uncontrollable pain, and they see no way for it to stop. And so that's what they're talking about. Suicide is preventable. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Most suicidal people don't give clues. I can't tell you how many families I had say to me, oh, we had no idea. This was a happy kid. We don't understand it. They didn't know what to look for. And that's our job, to educate them what to look for and to know when a kid's in trouble. And to take the time with their kids to know it. We live in a society now that is so busy and so involved in self, and so involved in earning a living, and so involved in technology, that they don't take the time just to talk to their kids. Just to be with them for 10 minutes even every day and say, how was your day? What's happened to the family dinner where we all used to sit around the table and talk? Doesn't exist anymore. Johnny's at baseball, Susie's at soccer, Mom is on the internet, and Dad is watching the baseball game. Nobody talks to each other. So that's one of the big problems. Depression is the #1 cause of suicide. Anybody?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is the #1 cause. Suicide runs in families.
Yes.
Yes, it does. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Only 1 in 3 depressed people gets help. And I have another slide with that one there. There are certain ethnic groups of people who die of suicide more often. True? Yes.
That one throws me a little bit because I just had this in class yesterday with people. There are some people that as a philosophy choose to die by suicide that are ethnic or cultural, like Eskimos have gone into the they're old, and the Japanese pilots. And
Yes, yes. It's a little rarer than it used to be, but there is an ethnic thought or what is the word I'm looking for? An ethnic intention? Connection. Thank you very much. An ethnic connection to some groups of people that die of suicide. The American Indian, by the way, right now has a very high suicide rate. And it's not an ethnic thing to die of suicide amongst the American Indians. It's due to other things that are going on. A lot of it is alcoholism and drugs. But yes, there are some ethnic groups. It used to be that more, and it still is, more white boys die than other groups. However, unfortunately, our black brothers are catching up. So we have to, excuse me? The numbers, they're catching up on suicide. Not as many as the white boys do, and the reasons are, we're not sure why, but part of it we do believe is the connection to church in the black family. We believe the connection to church and black family is a great support system, and that's one of the reasons why black families have less suicides. So that's one of your protective factors that we're going to talk about. Yes?
I gleaned a fact years ago, and I want to correct it if I'm wrong. I have always said that teenage black males, like 16 to 20-something, were in the very high risk, like basic socioeconomic factors, and that's not true anymore.
Well, they're in a high risk like any other teens, but as of now, we've had lower rates
I'm glad to know that.
in that group. And I really do believe it has to do with family connection as far as the church playing a big part in their family. Yeah. Okay. Only one. Suicide is a sin.
No, I'm not touching that.
No.
It's not what?
I said I'm not touching that.
You're not touching it?
I'll touch it. No.
It's an individual belief, and the reason I bring it in, and the reason I bring it up is, if we're going to reduce the stigma and make people understand that this is due to an illness and not a choice like other choices, then we have to deal with this. The Catholic Church for many, many years wouldn't touch it's a sin, that's all there is to it. About 3 years ago, I got an invitation to a Catholic youth group where there was one of the kids had attempted suicide. And I was so happy to see the change in that whole thought process by the church that I went to, and it's happening in more churches and more churches. And I think that's the only way that we're going to get the change in that perspective, is to make people understand that this is due to an illness. And dying of cancer is not a sin. Yes?
One of the things they say about depression is it can be a terminal illness. So thinking of it that way rather than as, and again, the choice thing is really important there. Choice is just...
We're going to talk about the lack of choice, yes.
A very fundamental thing a lot of people forget is you have to have capability and intent, if you believe in sins, to commit a sin. And you don't have capability and intent, clearly, when you choose to commit suicide.
That's very good. I'll have to remember that one.
I also want to mention that is so disturbing to me every day, because same-sex relationships are not a choice either. And it's not a sin if you have no choice. And so the connection between suicide and same-sex relationships is such a big one. It's what needs to...
Society is slowly coming around, and maybe we'll have a lot less LGBT suicides if they do come around. I have had such an education in the LGBT community. I tried for 5 years to get into it, and unless you are LGBT, there's a lack of trust. And finally, they accepted us to come in and help, because at that point, the city of Wilton Manors had the second highest suicide rate in the United States. And that's primarily a very large LGBT community in that city. So, next. Okay, let's talk about the signs. There are 20 signs we're going to deal with. And they are something that you have to look at. This is, if you get nothing out of today, and they're back there on a sheet, both on a green sheet, just as the 20 signs, and on a yellow sheet, connected to verbalizing and language and so forth. So take those sheets. Talking about or preoccupation with death. It's a really important one. When they start talking about or have preoccupation with death. How many of you have dealt with kids that are goths? Anybody? Okay. Do they talk about death all the time? Okay. So they're in a frame of mind that you have to be careful. You have to listen. You have to be aware of what's going on with those kids. Mental illness or previous suicide attempts. There's a dichotomy here somewhere in that many that do previous attempts don't attempt again. How many people think that? I know somebody that attempted 14 times before they completed suicide. They weren't very good at it, but they were intent on completing. And they had a family that watched them carefully and still couldn't save them. So 14 times is a lot. I'll tell you a story. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I did a presentation to police officers, crisis intervention training. And I do it from the family's perspective. And I have a story that one of the police officers told me a while back that I share with them all the time, about a police officer that went out because there was a call from a mother about her son wanting to jump off the balcony of their condo. And the police officer came, he took him downstairs, and this young man had been Baker acted before. So he knew how to talk the police officer out of it. He knew what to tell him so that the police officer didn't have, quote, at danger of hurting himself or somebody else. Because those are the rules. And by the way, there's a judge in Broward County who wants to get that changed so that it's a little more broad so that you can get people Baker Acted, not just on those bases, which will help a lot of people. So he took him downstairs, and he made a very big mistake in that he wouldn't listen to the mother. He only would talk to the child, to the young man. And the mother could have told him he was Baker Acted before and all this. He said, no, 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 I'm just talking to him. My job is to find out what is happening with him. And the young man talked him out of it. 2 hours later, he was up on top of another building, and he jumped. That police officer has had to struggle with that. And that's one of the things, unfortunately, that they do struggle with when that happens. I can't say it was his fault, because it wasn't. He did what he was supposed to do according to the law, except that he didn't listen to the mom. So one of my point is as therapists, I don't know if you have problems often with the HIPAA thing about not talking to people about what's going on, but you can get them to talk to you. They can tell you what they know. A mother can tell you what she knows. You don't have to tell her back, but you can listen and get a lot of information from a mother, a father, a teacher, a coach, if they're willing to talk to you, to help you with that client. Things that you wouldn't hear from the client, but could hear from somebody else that may give you a way to open a door with that client. So think about that, about other people talking to you, okay? Have a recent loss or unexpected loss. And we talked about suicide survivors. Those are people who have lost someone to suicide. They are at higher risk for suicide. And we know that it runs in families, so sometimes there's depression. I have a brother and sister who had, it's two families really, they're half brother and sister. There's 5 suicides in that family. So depression runs in families, other mental diagnoses are run in families, so you have to be aware, okay? Have increased use of alcohol, drug, or medications. We talked about that as being self-medication. If you have somebody that's at risk, take the medications away, get rid of them. If they need to take medicine, give it to them. Physically, you give it to them, or have the family member give it to them, so that they don't have access if they're at risk. Failure to take prescribed medications or take care of their illnesses. If you're diabetic and you stop taking your insulin, what are you doing?
Killing yourself.
That's kind of a suicide. And people that are depressed will do that. People that have other mental illnesses. How about, well, we'll get to that later. Manic behavior, inflated self-esteem. We'll talk a little bit about manic depression later too. Extreme anxiety, agitation, or enraged behavior. Feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, desperation, guilt, or no self-worth. I'm not perfect enough. And I think when we see the video, you'll see that kind of element in that one too. And I'm going to say goodbye to old friends. My son, the night before he died, went to visit 5 different friends. We knew he was in trouble. We had him on medication. We watched him 24/7. He either was working with my husband or he was with me. The day that Friday, I was not feeling well. I woke up, I was very dizzy, and he took me to the doctor. And we had dinner that night, and we watched television together, and he went to sleep. The next morning, we went to sleep. Next morning, we woke up, he wasn't at home. He was gone. That night, he went to visit 5 friends to say goodbye to them. The next day, we didn't see him all day Saturday. He didn't come home. Sunday, they found him. Not one of those friends picked up the phone. They said, Mitch was here last night. I didn't like the way he sounded. If one had picked up the phone, maybe we could have saved him. So family and friends need to know that they are gatekeepers and they have to open their mouths and be aware of what's going on and not be afraid. And this is one of the things we teach teenagers in school with our Hope Clubs, is that it's a good thing to help a friend. Saying goodbye to old friends, planning a suicide or getting a weapon. I had no idea that our son had 2 guns. He had a rifle and he had a gun. I had no idea. We had no idea he had it. If we knew he had it, we looked in his room, it wouldn't have been there. So you have to be more proactive. He had it hidden in his car, and we never searched his car. We searched his room, but not his car. So those are things that somebody has to be proactive. Tell a family, if you think your kid's in danger, look everywhere. Everywhere that you think they might hide a weapon. Okay? Behavior changes, taking unnecessary risks, acting out, just not behaving like themselves. You know, I tell the kids, if you're a kid that every day walks into school with their thing in their ears, with their music going, and they're all and then all of a sudden they start coming to school or not coming to school, like this. Somebody's got to notice. Something is wrong. So watch how the kids are acting. Change in eating habits. Large weight loss or large weight gain. We're not talking about a little bit. We're talking about something you can see or are aware of. Changes in sleep habits. Too much. The kid that never gets out of bed. Or the kid that's up all the time and can't sleep at all. Trouble concentrating or being indecisive. Well, we know teenagers aren't too decisive to start with, but if you can't, and this is one of the other examples I use with kids, if you get up in the morning and you can't decide what you want to wear to school, that's fine. But if you try on 20 different outfits and you don't get to school because you can't decide what to wear to school, then something's wrong. Okay? Unexplaining acquiring a weapon. Withdrawal from family and friends. The kid who's on the basketball team and suddenly doesn't go to practice anymore. The kid who has a hobby or goes out every Saturday to the mall with his friends and suddenly doesn't go anymore. The big changes in withdrawal. The kid that ends up sitting in his room on the computer, some of them do anyway, 24/7, and they didn't do that before, there's a change, okay? Acquiring a weapon or pills, that goes without saying. Crying or the lost ability to know joy. They don't know what it is to know joy, but you know what it is for them to know joy. You can see when they're feeling wonderful and when they're excited and when they're proud of themselves and all that. When they can no longer feel that, that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. Loss of interest in hobbies or schoolwork. Again, withdrawal from things. And loss of interest in personal appearance. Now, I got caught in the rain today, so my personal appearance isn't perfect. But what I usually do with the kids is I say, look at that girl over there with that perfect hairdo. She must have spent hours getting her hair look so perfect and beautiful. And next day, she comes to school looking like she just got out of bed. And next day, the same thing. And next day, the same thing. We know something is very, very wrong. So pay attention. Giving away prized possessions. This is a really, really, really big one. And this goes for all ages. By the way, these go for all ages. I did a presentation at a school many years ago. It was one of the first times I was able to get into a school. For years I couldn't get in. And I set up my PowerPoint and it said, suicide prevention. And it was a little before the presentation started, and one of the teachers walked in and he said to me, "Are you going to talk about that?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it really needs to be talked about." And he walked away, didn't say a thing. And then I got into the presentation and I got to this, and he stood up and he said to me, "I had a student come to me and bring me his favorite poster from his bedroom and say to me, 'Would you please hang this up in the classroom and never take it down?'" He said, "I did. And I couldn't quite understand it, but I thought he just wanted to share it with the class." 2 weeks later, he died of suicide. He says, "That hangs in my classroom and will always hang in my classroom, because if I had known that, that kid would have gotten help." So when they give away possessions, they're trying to say to you, "Don't forget me. I want you to always remember me. I want to be part of your life. I don't want to disappear. I'm leaving, but I don't want to disappear. I want to be still here in some way." And that's what they're giving you. Okay?
My name is Jelaine Zakari, and I'm here today to talk to you about something you do not want to hear about. Something I wish to God I was not here talking about. Something I thought that myself and my family were completely safe from. Last April, my son Cody killed himself. He was just finishing his second year at University of Florida in mechanical engineering, getting ready to come home for summer break, telling all his friends how excited he was. No one ever suspected that he was secretly traumatized, except for his roommates and maybe the Gainesville police. I'm sharing this part of my life with you because I cannot save my son. It has taken me several months to realize that no matter how angry I get or how hard I try, he is not coming home. The most I can do now is to be there for my daughter and to maybe help others realize that troubles are not always evident. Let me tell you a little bit about Cody. First off, he loved going to UF and being on his own. He was always so independent and strong-minded, even as a young child. His strength in academics received him a full high school scholarship to American Heritage High School, a bright future scholarship to UF, and a National Merit finalist. His sense of humor was always witty and sarcastic, never taking life seriously. We were all so proud of him. I always believed that he would make the right choices for himself. Well, being human, Cody made a mistake, one that he felt he couldn't live with. Now I'm going to let him tell you about it in his final letter, and I've asked his best friend, lifetime friend, Nick Islami, to read. I will follow with my response letter. My hope in sharing my family's personal tragedy is to try to spare another family this heartbreak.
To Mom, Dad, and Hannah, I have no idea how to put into words all the things I want to say to you. I love you more than I could ever hope to express, even if I was never very good at showing it. Even if my actions now seem to suggest the opposite. If I had known 2 weeks ago that I would be doing this, I would have driven home and never left. On April 11th, DEA agents searched my apartment on suspicions that my roommate was selling drugs. Like the short-sighted idiot I am, I was making hallucinogens known as mushrooms and DMT. These are safe to the body and completely non-physically addicting, but they're Schedule I drugs, meaning their manufacture is considered a greater offense than crystal meth or crack. Yeah, makes no sense to me either. Among other things, I am soon to be charged with at least 4 felonies, 2 of them being drug manufacturing and trafficking. Basically, life-changing consequences that I am not capable of dealing with. I never made these to sell, just for my own enjoyment. I know this is pointless information, but wanted you to know that this is not something you could or should have seen coming. 2 weeks ago, I was very, very happy with my life, and suicide was literally the last thing on my mind. Mom and Dad, I love you so much, and I could not have asked for better parents. You gave me a special and beautiful life, and were there for me through all my ups and downs. I was given a perfect life and opportunity by you, but I played a selfish gamble with my future and lost big on it. There should be no guilt or what ifs in your heart, as you should know that nothing you could have done would have made me a better person. I am a failure in this case. I believed I would never be caught for my own actions, and I was wrong. I failed to see that the most important part of life is family, and my greatest regret, other than what I am doing to you and our family, is that I did not spend more time with you and Hannah in recent years. You deserved a better son, and I wish I could have been that son. Hannah, this is hard for me to write, especially knowing the pain I'm about to cause you and Mom and Dad. I messed up big in a big way, and I'm taking the selfish way out. I love you so much, Hannah, and I'm sorry I won't be able to be there for you as you go through life. You are growing into a beautiful young woman. I know, I checked your Facebook, and I cannot express how sorry I am to be leaving you, especially like this. I was not the big brother I wish I could have been for you, and that is my greatest regret. You, Mom, and Dad do not deserve what I am doing to you. I am a horrible role model, but I know you will continue to be a beautiful person and live an outstanding life. I just wish I could be there for you. I will not try to justify my actions, both the drugs and the suicide. Though I strongly disagree with the laws regarding the two main substances I was caught with, a law is a law. I played with fire and I got burned. I was unintentionally gambling away my future, my happiness, and my life all in the name of stupid fun. I'm beyond sorry for my actions, Mom and Dad. You raised a better son than what I've done, and I have no explanation for that. I wish I did. I wish I did. I wish I had a horrible family so I could do this without no remorse, but I don't. I have a loving family that is perfect in every sense of the word, and now I'm throwing that away and ruining your lives for further selfish reasons. I wish I was a better person, a better man, a better son, and a better brother, but I'm not. I'm just some selfish idiot causing big problems in your lives by escaping my own. But that I always have and always will love you, Cody.
Dear Cody, I want you to know that I forgive you for taking your precious life away from us. I understand that you are in such a dark place that you could not find your way out. If only you would have reached out to us. Did you not realize how deep our love was for you? That we would have spared no effort or cost to see you safely through this storm? I would give anything to have you back. I'm sure you suffered tremendously, but now your family and friends are suffering and will continue to suffer because you are not here with us. You found yourself under a dark, ominous cloud. But how many times have we put up those damn storm shutters on our 12-foot windows, only to have the storm be so mild that you and your sister played with the wind? Sometimes fear is worse than reality. I know that you would have made it. We would have rallied as a family and dealt with your problem and been stronger for it. Wiser too. Maybe we would even someday laugh about the college days and worry about your children as they headed off into the world. Your storm would have passed, Cody, and the sun would have risen for you again. But for now, you'll remain forever in my heart. Love, Mom.
Hello, my name is Jackie Rosen, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention, or FISP. What you have just heard is one of just many stories that take place in the U.S. at a rate of 35,000 that die by suicide and up to 875,000 attempts each year in the U.S. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in our country. Each and every 15.2 minutes there is a death by suicide and an attempt every 38 seconds. Suicide is the third highest killer of 14 to 24-year-olds and the second highest killer of college students. The most prevalent cause of suicide is depression, and as a family member, friend, co-worker, or schoolmate, you need to know the signs of suicide. Don't ignore the signs. Reach out, help. Go to the FISP website and learn all about the signs and how the many things that we have and resources and what FISP really does to help. You can can make a huge difference in a lot of lives when you help save a single life. You may even change the world.